Well, good morning. Great way to start the day today. A lot of good things. So a few years ago, I was reading Psalm 119 in my daily Bible, and I started noticing something really interesting. Now, did you know that Psalm 119 has a very unique characteristic? I don't know if anybody's knows that, but and I could say, is it that Psalm 119 is the longest psalm, or that it uses the Hebrew alphabet in an acrostic? While both of those things are true, that's not what I'm talking about. As I read verse after verse, I kept being surprised, and it was kind of like a mystery. It was unfolding before me. So I began with my highlighter or a marker, making marks in my Bible, every verse in 119 that said something about the Word of God. I assumed that it wasn't going to be in every verse, but I kept marking and I kept turning pages. So how many times do you think in those 176 verses of Psalm 119, do you think it says something about the Word of God? How many times does Psalm 119 say the Word of God provides direction? Or how many times does 119 make a proclamation about the Word of God? Well, as I read, I couldn't believe it. The Word of God was mentioned in every one of those 176 verses. And I thought, that's so cool. So let's have some fun this morning, just for a minute, because I want to show you a little bit about what I mean. About a Bible, I'm going to just do a little random thing. I don't want to make it, too contrived. So we're just going to randomly go here, and I'm going to turn to Psalm 119. One more. All right, and picking a verse, I'm going to say 84. How long must your servant wait? When will you punish my persecutors? Okay, that one doesn't really have it, so wow. Okay, 121. I have done what is right and just. Do not leave me to my oppressors. One more, 122. Ensure your servant's well-being. Do not let the arrogant oppress me. This is a little embarrassing. Let's try one more. I'm going to go 132. Turn to me and have mercy on me as you always do to those who love your name. Well, your name is kind of like your word, so that's really close. Okay, those four verses don't directly mention the Word of God in any way. But I will tell you that 171 of the 176 verses in Psalm 119 are direct in doing just that. They really do speak about the Word of God. In fact, some scholars argue, and you've already seen some of the evidence, they'll argue that all but one of the verses makes at least an indirect reference to the Word of God. And since I've already shared the four that don't, I think you should have number 5. And that is, your faithfulness continues through all generations. You establish the earth and it endures. Now, as awesome as that is, it's awesome. Saying that it speaks about the Word of God, I think is kind of a reach. But still, you guys, 171 times is pretty awesome. Now, you might already know there are a lot of prophecies and proverbs and psalms in the Bible where the same idea gets repeated over and over, but not like in Psalm 119. Psalm 119 is special. It's where 171 of the 176 verses are thematically, both generally and specifically, focused on one thing. And that one thing is, of course, that one thing is, of course, the keeping, the meditating on, the drawing strength from, the being consumed by, delighting in, being guided by, the laws, precepts, commands, statutes, ways, promises, decrees, and all other words from God. Most of us, are familiar with a praise song or two that repeats a phrase over and over and over. I've known people to call that, especially when I was a teenager, I've heard people say that's vain repetition. Well, the Psalms are some of our worst offenders in this department. Like Psalm 136, for example, returns to his love endures forever at the end of every single verse. But 119 laughs at 136 with almost 7 times the repetition. Wouldn't you think that after reading or singing something over and over and over like that, it would become empty? What purpose could God have for directing the writing of such seemingly mindless reiteration? Well, the question is, what if all the repetition was done for us? Maybe we need to hear this message 171 times because it's really, really, really important. What if it's repeated to make sure that we get it? Have you ever had to hear something many times to have it, get into your heart? I know I've had that experience attending a Christian concert where the song repeated over got in there. And I also had another experience in a spiritual disciplines class I took back years ago where I was asked to self-isolate and repeat a phrase like Jesus is Lord over and over and over for at least 15 minutes to really focus on and immerse my heart in that truth. Well, the almost endless echo created in Psalm 119 certainly has a purpose. One author that I read said, all these praises for the Word of God are provided so that the man of God will not run out of gas or words when it comes to praising the Word of the Lord. I like that. Psalm 119 creates a beautiful chain of connecting ideas which speak about everything in life being bound to this one thing. And what is that? By now I'm sure that you know. And that is that we all desperately need the Word of God. This psalm is focused on glorifying the Word of God and pointing out our need for the Word. So according to 119, what role do you think the Word of God has in the life of God's woman or God's man? What role? And I think this is pretty cool too. And I know that if you search this psalm, you will find this. Psalm 119 makes it clear, whatever your life issue, whatever your problem, the answer is the Word of God. Here are a few examples from 119 to show the intersection of the Word of God with our lives. If you need wisdom, if I need wisdom, your commands make me wiser than my enemies, for they are ever with me. Do you want discernment? I have more understanding than the elders at Three Chopped. Just kidding. For I obey your precepts, and the unfolding of your words gives light. It gives understanding to the simple. You want help to avoid sin? How can a young man keep his way pure? By living according to your word. And I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. I know this is going to be a spot for somebody in the room today. Are you struggling because you're filled with hurt or grief? My soul is weary with sorrow. Strengthen me according to your word. My comfort in my suffering is this: your promise preserves my life. Are you looking for direction for your life? Blessed are they whose ways are blameless, who walk according to the law of the Lord. Your statutes are my delight. They are my counselors, our counselors. I have considered my ways and have turned my steps to your statutes. Your word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. Direct my footsteps according to your word. Let no sin rule over me. Great peace have they who love your law, and nothing can make them stumble. If our hearts are open, if we would just open our hearts, the Word of God provides wisdom and helps us avoid sin. The Word offers comfort and counsel as we go through some of life's storms. You guys know this. Obeying the Word of God provides light, so we know which path to choose. And just like in 102 of 119, of course, this is all 119. When I read 102 in the Message, I got goosebumps. So I'm not going to show you a slide. I just want you to listen. I love this, 102. From the Message, I never make detours from the route you laid out. You gave me such good directions. That's pretty awesome. But what do I do when bad things are happening to me? The arrogant mock me without restraint, but I do not turn from your law. Though the wicked bind me with ropes, I will not forget your law. They almost wipe me from the earth, but I have not forsaken your precepts. Psalm 119 helps us consider all the work the Word of God does, what it has done, can do, and will do in our lives. As we account for all that God provides for us from His Word, you guys know, that Psalm 119 has to have something to say about the investment that we should make in the Word of God. It's where the rubber meets the road. So how much do we value the Word of God? I delight in your decrees. I will not neglect your word. How I long for your precepts, for I delight in your commands because I love them. I won't neglect the word because I delight in it. And I love this one too. 54. Your decrees are the theme of my song wherever I lodge. The law from your mouth is more precious to me than thousands of pieces of silver and gold. I will never forget your precepts, for by them you have preserved my life. Now, Strong's lexicon says that the Hebrew word here, translated preserved, means to live or have life. So we could read 93 like this: your word causes me to live. Continuing on value, your statutes are my heritage forever. They are the joy of my heart. So how do you feel about the Word of God? Do we love the Word as this psalmist does? Streams of tears flow from my eyes, for your law is not obeyed. I obey your statutes, for I love them greatly. The psalmist says it over and over and over. I love your word, Lord, and I obey the one who spoke it. Now, this is just a flyover of 119, but even in our skimming, do you feel all the passion and importance God calls us to place on His Word? Hearing all this calls us the question, do we meditate on the Word of God and live as it teaches? Do we long for the Word of God? Do I hold fast to it? Do I delight in the Word of God? Have I set my heart on the Word of God? Do I trust God and put my hope in His Word? If we want to answer yes, we have to make time for the Word. None of what we have read about the communion between the Word and our lives is possible if we don't make time for the Word. So, big question, how much time do you have for the Word of God? I have to wonder if Psalm 119 counsels us on that as well. You know it does. I meditate on your precepts and consider your ways. I will ponder your statutes. Now, this is the low-level stuff. Meditating and pondering do require some investment. But do you think 119 might challenge us with something a little more specific about the amount of time that God's men and God's women might spend in the Word? My soul is consumed with longing for your laws occasionally, at all times. These blow me away. In the night, I remember your name, O Lord, and I will keep your law. And this one, at midnight, I rise to give thanks for your righteous laws. And I don't know if this is a midnight reading of the word or just waking up at midnight to thank God for his laws. Oh, how I love your law. I meditate on it all day long. My eyes stay open through the watches of the night that I may meditate on your promises. I say, wow. Have you ever heard such passion for the Word of God? I wonder if any of us have ever had our eyes open through the night, meditating on His Word. I have not. It's a little convicting. So how much time do you have for the Word of God? How much value do you place on the Word of God? God has given us Psalm 119 to help us come up with an answer. And so as I considered how to close this message, I deleted everything when I read this story. This is how we'll end. Exactly. This is how we will end today. Not my story. I happened to be standing in a grocer's shop one day in a large manufacturing town in the west of Scotland when a poor, old, frail widow came in to make a few purchases. There was never, perhaps, in that town a more severe time of distress. Nearly every loom was stopped. Decent and respectable tradesmen who had seen better days were obliged to subsist on public charity. So much money per day, but a trifle at most, was allowed to the truly poor and deserving. The widow had received her daily pittance, and she had now come into the shop of the grocer to lay it out to her best advantage. She had but a few coppers in her withered hands. Carefully, she expended her little stock, a pennyworth of this and other necessary of life, nearly exhausted all she had. She came to the last penny, and with a singular expression of heroic contentment and cheerful resignation on her wrinkled face, she said, "Now I must buy oil with this, that I may see to read my Bible during these dark nights, for it is my only comfort now when every other comfort has gone."